Hello there. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter. Welcome to Overtime. Um, is there an echo? Is there an echo already? Yeah, that's well. I wouldn't start a stream without it. Let me know if there really is an echo, and I should be able to deal with it. Okay. What we have here is you are seeing a stream right now of CBS. We're gonna move that here. This is. There we are. That is CBS in Minnesota right now, which is covering the jury has come back. They have reached a verdict. They were anticipated to have read the verdict by now. They have not, but we do know that the media has been allowed back into the court, and they are waiting. Now, what we know, too, is they could come back with anything. They could come back with not guilty. They could come back with anything from not guilty to second-degree manslaughter, second-degree unintentional murder, and or third-degree murder. So there's a number of possible charges. I'm going to hit the audio now and let you guys listen in on what we're looking at. If he gets second-degree unintentional murder, which is to say that he did not intend to cause the death, but did cause the death while committing a felony, they're looking at a recommended sentence of 12 and a half years. I will be honest, I am concerned about the likelihood of him being found not guilty and what that could mean. I don't think that the consequences should be reading into the jury's factors at all. And the fact that it's come back this soon, I think, is a decent sign of a conviction, although there are lawyers who dedicate their lives to trying to predict what this means and aren't able to reach a conclusion. All right, it looks like we may have something, so let me bring the audio in on this.
We have breaking news from Minneapolis, where we hear the jury has reached a verdict in the Derek Chauvin murder trial. Chauvin, the fired Minneapolis police officer, faces 3 counts in the death of George Floyd: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. He faces a maximum of 40 years in prison if he's convicted. The verdict is expected to be read between 4:30 and 5 p.m. Eastern Time.
All right, so the original prediction was that it was going to be read between 3:30 and 4. They have now pushed that back to between 4:30 and 5 our time, so that's Eastern Standard Time. So just enough time for us to harass Nate the lawyer and see if he wants to join us or see if anybody else would like to join. So I may do that. Titan, if you happen to be free, because you're never busy doing 3,000 things at a time, and want to reach out to him, I may reach out in a second. I also, we'll put the audio back in and let that run, and I may try to reach him. I am literally minutes back from vacation. Minutes. Nate is doing his own show, which I anticipated too, so I figured that was highly likely. So I figured that would be, yeah. Well, there's any number of reasons why they could be pushing the reading back. The reality is there's probably other motions. There may be more motions to clear the court before reading it. There could be any number of motions. So pushing it back, in my view, doesn't mean anything. I don't think anybody should worry about that now. I do know that they're taking security extraordinarily seriously, and this was described as basically an impenetrable fortress at this point. $5 from Michael Westby. Michael, thank you very much for your super chat. We really appreciate it, so thank you very much. Guilty verdict on all counts could set an important precedent. Police will now be held accountable for being judge, jury, and executioner. I think that's a good point. I think socially we need a guilty verdict. I think we need one. I am hesitant to say too much about my own views because, while they probably mimic everybody else's views, I have only seen some portions of the evidence. I wasn't following the trial. But it looked pretty clear to me, but I'm hesitant about, things that look clear, aren't always as black and white as they look. I have a very hard time imagining that he is not guilty in any meaningful sense. So that's my view. But having said that, I wasn't following all of this. So, and of course, nobody's going to know. I mean, whether he's guilty or not is ultimately going to be determined by a jury. So, we're going to put the audio back in a minute, but I guess that what that means is we've got probably about, and if we can get Vox, because of course Vox is an attorney in Wales, so that Vox is the other one that I need to, we've been sans Vox for quite some time, so I will see if we can reach out to Vox and get her a link. So let me put the audio back. And again, literally, I am just back from vacation, and I have a control pad for the show, which I'd taken with me because I was just like, it's not going to be a big deal. So it hasn't been set up, so I'm not in full control of the monstrosity that is OBS, but I will be in a minute. Like I said before, so I think Michael brought up a good point, but there's also the point of what happens if he's found not guilty. And I mean, I'm also concerned about officers who are good officers genuinely being concerned about being prosecuted. But on the flip side, I think things cannot continue with the status quo. So we'll see what it is and what's going on. I am going to welcome Maudy. Thank you very much. Monty is here, and we are very pleased to see Monty. Bregwin, thank you. Glad to see all of you guys. Let's see, Jake 4D, who was almost first. I think one of us just hit the enter key slightly faster than the other. So let's see. This is CBS Minnesota now, and we will see what it is that they have to say.
Then a substantial cause in George Floyd's death, and that would be sufficient for this second-degree murder charge. They then need to march down that long list, and next they're looking at third-degree murder, which is a depraved mind murder in Minnesota. And they're looking to see if Officer Chauvin, in fact, did create a situation which facilitated an imminent harm, and if he acted with a quote-unquote depraved mind. And then last, they're looking at second-degree manslaughter. In Minnesota, this would require culpable negligence. So they're trying to make a determination as to whether or not Officer Chauvin's actions rose to that level. So there are, for all the counts, a number of steps that they have to go through. All 12, of course, if it is guilty, all 12 need to agree. All 12 need to agree beyond a reasonable doubt. And I keep coming back to this idea that the speed, I feel like, has something to do with the fact that all three counts here did not require intent. All three counts are based on an unintentional death or an unintentional killing. So the speed certainly indicates that the jurors were of the same mind. There have been 3.5 weeks where they weren't allowed to talk about the one thing they have in common. Now they were finally last night able to talk about that. I suspect that they got in that jury room, they took an initial vote, and that they were probably pretty close to consensus, which is why they decided to keep working a little bit later into the night and then come back earlier, thinking basically we're almost there.
Right. And now, I wonder, Gloria, if we could dive into a little bit the individual sort of identities of the jury. I mean, of course, we don't know who these individuals are, but more the makeup of the jury. They are all residents of Hennepin County, which is about 74% white, according to some statistics I found online. Minneapolis, where George Floyd died, is 64% white. How important was it that this jury accurately reflect?
All right. So, and we've heard now. So this is the jurors. It looks like actually the makeup was slightly. Just statistically speaking, in the favor of a black jury, which is honestly sometimes kind of rare. I shouldn't say sometimes it can be a problem that minorities are not properly represented, and you get one white officer being charged of a crime like this, being tried by nothing but white males. And that's a jury of his peers, but that's probably not precisely what it meant. Heard it here first. Jake 4D, $2 super chat. Thank you. Heard it here first. Nick is not in full control. The aspects of this show over which I have control is probably hovering around 10%. Those of you who have watched the show with any regularity, which includes you, Jake, should be aware that 10% is reasonably accurate. Now I'm going to do something here. Okay, no, I was going to do something there, but I don't have So we'll get to that. I was absolutely not going to drink a caffeinated beverage. If I was going to drink a caffeinated beverage, I was going to ask the live chat to possibly distract Monty for a moment so that I don't get a text about it later. But at any rate, and I'm still wearing, truth be told, I'm still wearing my, this is all I had that I could, yeah. I could put on my $400 suit, but that's about it. The other interesting thing about this, and I think we had discussed this before when we had Nate on. The other interesting thing, of course, is that intent doesn't matter, and this is what they were speaking of here. And the bar for conviction is reasonably low. The other thing that was made crystal clear was that if it turns out that his knee on Floyd's neck was only a contributing factor, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if either drugs in his system or carbon monoxide or any other thing was a part of it. This is sort of the straw on the camel's back problem that we've talked about before. You can sit there if you were to. This man died, and if you were to remove any number of factors, he might have survived the encounter. So which factor do you blame? It may be that if he had not been on narcotics, he would have survived. Might also be that if the knee hadn't been on the neck, he would have survived. So which one do you blame? And it appears that the instructions in this case were, it doesn't matter if there were other contributing factors. If this officer, if it could be said that had he not put his knee on Floyd's neck, Floyd would have survived. If that can be said, then he's going to be found guilty. And since I think it's really crystal clear that you can say that, I would be shocked if there was anything other than a guilty verdict. Having said that, I've been shocked on these things more than once. So we're going to see what happens. We're expecting a verdict in probably, with any luck, within 20 minutes. They have already pushed the time back. I think there are probably numerous factors. Safety and security is one of them. If this turns out to be not guilty, I think we are going to be in for a very long evening in this country. So, like I said, we're gonna keep an eye on it. We are trying to get a hold of Vox, so hopefully Vox can join us. I may also give Vox a call. I don't like but this is a biggie. So I may text Vox, and hopefully I can get Vox. But in the meantime, let's listen to what we have so far. Now, what we're about to play here is CBS Minnesota. I'm checking a few other live streams to see what's the what could probably give us the most information, but I think CBS is going to be a good one. So we're going to stick with that for now. Monty is here. Monty, good to see you. And all right, let's put the audio back on this.
And the jury now has the power to do something about, a perceived injustice.
And I think that's, I won't call it a trope, but I do think that is a line that's used by many prosecutors because it's true. Juries have a great deal of power. And I think it was also very important that we see prosecutors who are working at the top of their game. And this is what we should have been receiving as a society throughout this American history, would be prosecutors who are looking to give justice to the victim and not to show the one-sidedness for police officers. So this has set a standard for prosecution of police involved civilian deaths that we should not turn from. We should make this the watermark until another higher standard is given to us. And this other point of the reasonableness of this police officer was something the prosecutors also put in the minds of the jury, that you're looking at what has been said by even the chief of police as being unreasonable policing. And that's that last bite of the freedom apple that police officers receive that the regular person does not. And so I think given the power to the jury saying that and helping us to realize as they stood by, as bystanders stood by helplessly and watched George Floyd's life taken away, that we now as bystanders get a chance to be a part of the process to give George Floyd justice in the end. On the last point I would make, the prosecutors, I would believe, and I've been very critical of prosecutors because there are good ones, but just like good cops, there are some bad apples out there. I think that this is going to put pressure on prosecutors to say that you can't just allow police officers to run wild. No matter what the verdict is, whatever the charge, hopefully the charge will be one and that they'll come through with a conviction. But I think it's going to be impossible for us to turn our backs on the pressure we should put on prosecutors across the country to prosecute these cases. Over 1,000 civilians die each year at the hands of police. We cannot allow prosecutors to let police believe they can get away with murder.
So, Gloria, do you think that whatever this verdict is, this case will bring about fundamental changes to policing, or only if Chauvin is found guilty?
I think we're going to be somewhere in between, and that place in between basically is we have reached a mark in this country where there are people of color, and remember, those protests were joined by many whites as well, where we're saying police officers are not above the law. They are not a celebrity status. They have to be accountable for their actions, and prosecutors have to play the role they're.
All right, so excuse me. Let's see. So Jake 4D, another $2. Thank you, Jake, very much. I keep looking at my mic instead of my camera. Amiga, you saw nothing. You saw nothing. DM me later, and we'll get that sorted out. That did not happen. Let's see. So Jake 4D, $2. Blame the last factor or the avoidable human. Yeah, I think I'm actually a big fan. I know people get upset, like, there's a car accident and insurance companies always assign percentages of blame, and people are like, oh, that's just them trying to get out of it. And that gets used for them to get out of having to pay full. But it's also true. There's hardly ever one cause for anything. And the problem is that does allow people in situations like this to wiggle out of it. And it's a problem for a court. And that's why we don't have robots applying the law. We have a jury that can think for themselves, because the law cannot be applied in black and white basically ever. So I think to answer Jake's super chat, which again, thank you very much for that super chat. To answer that to the best of my ability, what I would suggest is that you do have to, if there is a factor that was a human failure, where the human could reasonably have realized he shouldn't be doing that, that's where the vast majority of the blame is going to go. And, it's if I remember watching a court case, and there was a young kid who had gotten into a car wreck, and they blamed the fact that it was raining, so they blamed the weather. Well, that's actually entirely true by one, he hydroplaned. But as the driver, he should have realized that when it's raining, you slow down. So, you can't blame the rain. The rain is going to rain when the weather dictates. It's nothing that anybody has any control over. It's the human being that has to adapt to the situation. So for some intents and purposes, absolutely, you can blame the rain. But when you're talking about how an accident could have been prevented and whose fault it is, it's not the rain. And I just realized I almost walked into a Milli Vanilli song, and that was certainly not intentional. And I think I'll avoid a Milli Vanilli joke, except to say that, of course, there's there's millionaires, billionaires, and people who think they have $1 billion, but actually who are poor, Milli Vanillionaires. At any rate, yeah, I know I had to give a bad dad joke before going forward. So we are expecting a verdict really at any time now. They originally said between 3:30 and 4. They have now moved it to 4:30 and 5. So we are coming up on 4:30. I'm hoping that the fact that they gave it really an hour suggests that they are prepared for it. What we're seeing is a live shot of the courthouse that the media has described going in. They have described an immense amount of security, like what they had said that was essentially a fortress. So it looks like in a solipsist trial, everyone is, thank God, Porpoise is here. Of course, I'm hosting the show, so Porpoise has always been here. At any rate, good to see you, Porpoise. And thank you all for joining us. Dorito is here. We've got all sorts of, so thank you all. Also, we are going to be moving this to its own channel. I'm hesitant to do that, to be quite honest, because I like the fact that you can find all of In Time content in one place. But realistically speaking, there are people who love the news shows and really don't like any of the other culture or interview stuff that we do. And there are people who love the culture and interview, but really are sitting there going, why is Nick fooling around with breaking news? So we're splitting the channel, and we're going to have the breaking news and all of the news content, the rundowns, everything like that will be on one channel. And the other channel will be having our interviews. We were supposed to have Tart on tonight, so Tart to have a chat, have a discussion, but Tart will be unable to make it. They have been postponed 1 week, and so I will be updating that. But that's an example of course, in-time content, and overtime is what we would be doing now. We are simulcasting to overtime and in time right now. And I still think it's going to be about 2 weeks before we finish the move. But if you are interested in the overtime content, please do go to the overtime channel and subscribe there. If you're interested in both, subscribe to both. And certainly that helps us out because it's a new channel. It has to start from scratch, monetization, all of that other stuff. So I hope you guys will consider doing that. And in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the audio back in, and we're going to watch more. Again, we are listening to CBS Minnesota Live and trying to, and Casey, Randy, no verdict yet. Let me rephrase that. There is a verdict. We just don't know what it is. We were supposed to learn it by, they said no later than 4, but they've knocked that back to between 4:30 and 5. And I think they are preparing for the worst. If the verdict is a not guilty, I think we are going to see something we haven't seen in quite some time. And last summer, of course, we were streaming sometimes 16 hours a day covering what was going on. And my suspicion is that's probably going to be the best case scenario if the verdict is a not guilty on all counts. If it's guilty, I do think it's going to have some ramifications for how policing is done in the future. But that's something, I think, for speculation for another time. We've called out to, or reached out to Vox. Hopefully we can get a hold of Vox and bring her in. She is far better at predicting these kinds of things than I am, and is in fact actually kind of scary in her ability to accurately predict what is going on. All right, I am going to go for 1 minute and see if I can locate Vox. This is CBS Minnesota.
A case from start to finish this way, but it's not unusual that both sides, or excuse me, that the losing side would bring up an appeal. And in fact, we heard that yesterday from Judge Cahill, where he was very upset with comments that Congresswoman Maxine Waters had made. And he made two kind of different comments at the same time. He said, this is I'm paraphrasing, this is egregious, this is out of bounds, I wish lawmakers would stop saying this. But then he said, and he said, well, look, defense, maybe she's given you something for an appeal. And then he said, but no mistrial in this case, because I don't think that it would taint the jury enough. I don't think they're going to follow what a member of Congress says instead of following the jury instructions. So if there is a loss, I think that we will see there's an appeal based on the defense's request for a mistrial with respect to those comments. The defense also yesterday, I know, brought up issues of they felt that the prosecution was unfairly disparaging their particular position and in fact mischaracterizing their position at times, accusing them of falsehoods. And so if the defense loses, I would also expect that there be an appeal on those issues. So I hate to give you this
Jessica,
lawyerly
that those
answer.
are strong? But do you think those are strong grounds
no.
for an appeal?
No, I don't think so. I'm circumspect about being so definitive, but I don't think so. The Judge Cahill, I think, has actually been quite careful. He has thought through all of the objections in this case. It's not that I agree with every ruling for every objection, but it's a pretty significant standard to, for instance, overturn a verdict on appeal. It's not the same standard as the trial judge would be facing. And I don't see that a guilty verdict would be overturned in this case.
All right. Now, Gloria, I want to ask you about, the so-called blue wall of silence. Much has been made about the fact that in this.
All right. If you are just joining us, this is where we stand at around 3 o'clock. We were informed that there is a verdict in the Chauvin trial. I think there are 3 primary counts. I don't know if there are any other ones, but they're all obviously very serious. And the weakest of them appears to carry 12 and a half years as a recommended sentence. The verdict was supposed to be read sometime between 3:30 and 4. They knocked that back now to between 4:30 and 5 Eastern Standard Time. So we are expecting a verdict any minute. We are currently watching CBS in Minnesota. They have a live stream. And my hope is, my hope is that justice is done. My suspicion, based on what I've seen, and I have not poured through this from beginning to end, but I've seen enough to suggest to me that this was an already problematic officer who had already also been involved in the deaths of other suspects, and that the evidence strikes me as being reasonably overwhelming that he should probably be found guilty. And I have a tendency to examine these things a bit more than many people. So my suspicion is that the average American probably also thinks he needs to be found guilty. And so we will see. We're waiting. I think either going to be guilty or not, and there's a number of different counts, so they could split the difference. But even the weakest count is going to suggest jail time. Now, he has been free thus far, and what they are saying is if he is found guilty, he will be taken into custody immediately, and he will not be leaving the courthouse. So that is where it stands. I think we've discussed already. One of the things that has been brought up, and one of the reasons, this has a much lower bar for conviction than previous instances where we've seen officers on trial. It doesn't need to be proven that he killed him. It needs to be proven that he was a significant factor in the death, and but for that factor, he would have lived. And that may sound like splitting hairs. It's not. There could be other factors to his death. Perhaps he was on drugs, and had he not been on those drugs, he would have lived. That's fine. The reality is he was on those drugs. So given that circumstance, did Officer Chauvin apply enough of pressure to kill him? That's a much lower bar. So the judge explicitly threw out any mitigating circumstances to the death. And that means really the only question is, if Chauvin hadn't have done this, would the man have survived? And the testimony that I've seen indicates universally across the board the answer to that seems to be no. So, it seems to be yes, he would have survived. And yeah, I think I may have inverted that. Apologies. Like I said, I am literally minutes back from vacation, so it was fortuitous. And I'm still wearing my vacation shirt that says, what I do is grow a beard and know things. Well, at least half of that is true. At any rate, I'm going to catch up. Sentencing won't happen today. I think that's true. I think the other consensus is it looks like they were told that they could actually deliberate as long as they wanted in terms of hours in a day. So if they wanted to go home at a regular time, they could. If they wanted to stay longer, they could. They stayed longer, which suggests that they were pretty close to agreement early on as it is. You don't stay long. If you think that this is going to take weeks, you go home, you have a good meal, come back the next day. You stay longer if you think you're pretty close to an agreement, and if you think you might be able to, with a stretch, reach an accord. Now, they did not on the first day, but it looks like they did today. And I personally see that as a good sign. But like I said, whether reading juries and reading these things is art, science, or voodoo, it depends on the lawyer you ask. I'm not sure there's any, but I am cautiously optimistic, although I understand everybody is sort of on edge, and I think this is going to be a heavily watched verdict. So we are now just slightly into the second deadline that they set. We know that there is a verdict. We just don't know what it is. And we're expecting it to be read at any minute. I think there are going to be profound implications either way, no matter what that verdict ends up being. And there's going to be, I hope, positive consequences either way. There's going to be negative consequences either way as well. So I think there is no verdict that I opine on justice every now and then and what justice means. If there is such a thing, and if there is such a thing as God, God appears to have made it such that nobody will ever find justice in this life. And nobody's been able to explain justice to me in a way that could possibly have other. I remember a father who people broke into his house, tied him and his family up. He managed to escape, got to a neighbor. But by the time the police came, his family had been killed. And I remember they caught the two men who did this, and they were put on trial, and these men were put away forever, for the rest of their lives. And the consensus was that justice had been done. Justice would be him getting his family back. That can't happen. So the next best thing, I guess, happened. The closest thing to justice that I can see would be that this man is found guilty and that police departments across this country take a very hard look at procedures. This kind of thing doesn't happen in the same way in other countries. We are the only first world country that has this problem in this way. And that's not to say there aren't racist police forces. This isn't to say that there aren't other countries that have had issues like this for periods of time. I don't think we've gone a stretch without this problem. So the UK is recently now having a very serious spat, it appears, of bigoted and racist police officers. We've covered that briefly, and I'm sure we'll get to that again. But it does happen. It's human beings. But they seem to have procedures in place to eventually deal with it. We're one of the few countries that has had a very hard time getting it taken care of. This does remind me, by the way, we had a show tonight, TART, discussion with all of those gentlemen, and I was very much looking forward to it, but they are unable to make it. That's been postponed 1 week. And then we are going to also have our regular rundown, which may be rather interesting depending on what we get over the next few hours. And the Neil 604 Atheist is going to be joining us on Friday for another discussion. Now, we've already had his deconversion story. I found it, I very much enjoyed the fact that Neil 604 finally got to give his deconversion story, and that we could do that here. He is going to be gracing us with his presence again. Very much looking forward to that at the end of this week. And I think actually even too, Monty is going to be joining us for that. So we'll see. It depends. If I keep calling him Monty, he may refuse to acknowledge I exist. Although, quite frankly, for a shot at speaking with 604, I have a feeling he'll look the other way. So I will push that one as far as I can go. We're going to go back now to CBS in Minnesota, and we are awaiting a verdict. The verdict has been reached, and we are told that we're going to get it at some time. We are now halfway through the window of time in which we are expecting it. Let's see what we are hearing from Minneapolis CBS at this time.
You're exactly right. There was an attempt to maybe show it to the jury so much that it took some of the punch, some of the emotional impact out of it.
You know, I want to now bring in CBS News' Michael George, who is in Minneapolis. Michael, can you tell us what the mood is like there?
Yeah, I think right now everybody collectively is holding their breath, tense right now. People here in Minneapolis have been dealing with the pain of George Floyd's death for the last 11 months. We all remember what happened last summer when there were riots on the streets and there were buildings being burned, and there was a lot of anger in this community, and a lot of that still continues today. So while people are tense right now, awaiting that verdict any moment now, I think there's also a sense of relief as we talk to some people that maybe we're finally closer to the end of this process, and maybe after that healing can begin. But right now, everybody's just watching and waiting to see what the jury's verdict is.
And I imagine the police presence is very high there. What are you seeing in terms of that?
Yeah, there's already more than 3,000 National Guard members stationed here in Minneapolis right now. Extra law enforcement has been requested from other states as well. So certainly they are preparing for the possibility of unrest and violence. Everyone's hoping that's not the outcome, but the city says they want to be ready for that. And we've seen signs of that throughout Minneapolis. Buildings are boarded up throughout downtown, and even public schools will be closed tomorrow. Or rather, they'll do virtual learning rather than in-person learning, just in anticipation of the possibility of unrest.
Have you spoken to any folks there on the street? I mean, are the streets sort of empty, or are people just going about their business?
Well, police have been doing a good job of keeping crowds away from the courthouse through the jury deliberations. But now that we've reached a verdict, crowds are starting to gather outside the courthouse. We know that there will be actually press conferences and events outside the courthouse after the verdict. We know that George Floyd's family intends to speak 1 hour after the verdict is read. So we're starting to see crowds gather outside the courthouse, but there's also a growing law enforcement presence as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael. We will check in with you in just a second. Jessica, I want to ask you, because you're in LA and you say there are preparations there as well in case tensions run high or protests break out?
That's right. I mean, I don't think I'm sharing anything that's not public. Los Angeles obviously is a major city. We also, over the summer, saw protests based on racial injustice and problems with our criminal justice system. And so even though we are so far removed, in a lot of ways, I think we're not. Obviously, this is a systemic issue. This is a nationwide issue. And what happens in Hennepin County will affect a lot of people in Los Angeles County for reasons that we talked about, dealing both with what happens inside the courtroom and what happens outside of the courtroom. But at this point, I don't know a major city or county that doesn't have some plans in place. And frankly, it almost would be a dereliction of duty, I think, to ignore the fact that we might, depending on the verdict, that we might see civil unrest tonight.
All right. And Gloria, I'm sorry, remind me where you are with everybody on remote. And, we're talking to everybody in different places. I'm not sure exactly where you are. Remind me where you are and let me know, what you are seeing and hearing there.
New York and New York City. And yes, the offices and stores have boarded their windows. There are people gathering in small groups. Many people, it's very quiet. Many people are waiting. I know that I've talked to people who are anxious, and when we first heard the verdict was happening, I got chills, fear, anxiety, there's so much this country has not done right when it comes to race relations and criminal justice. There are so many pent-up feelings. So many times this country has come to a crossroads and gone in the wrong direction when it comes to justice for people of color, and in particular African Americans. We've had Tamir Rice and Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and Philando Castile and Breonna Taylor. I mean, there are so many cases that people have these pent-up emotions. So I think that business owners are fearful that whatever the verdict may be, if it's not satisfactory to some, that there will be destruction of some property or at least damage to property. It's the unknown. I think that's what it is. It's the fear of the unknown, because how do you get justice in this country if you don't go through the prosecutor's office because they fail to prosecute? Then many people feel they have to go to the streets. And I know for a fact social justice comes from litigation, legislation, and protest. I've written several books about it. I've talked about race and criminal justice. And I still know that despite this country being supposedly a bright light on the hill of democracy, it has failed the Black and brown communities. And so many people are going to wonder if it's going to fail those communities today.
All right. So, and then a few other things I think to mention before we go back to that. Again, we are waiting for the verdict. We know there is a verdict. It was supposed to be read more than an hour ago, but they delayed it, and so we are just waiting. We do have a few other pieces of news that's been a little troubling. Mass shootings are up in this country, nearly 73% so far. We are averaging 3 shootings every 2 days. Now, those of you who are paying attention, and I know that's not everyone, during our last coverage of this, one of the things was about a month ago, I had said that the shootings were in fact down, and at the time they were. They have started to go up dramatically. This is a symbol, not a symbol, but this is a consequence in part of us going back to society. When everybody is indoors all the time, when every business is shuttered, it's a lot harder to commit a mass shooting. And it was my hope that by everybody sort of being out of the system for a little while, it would reduce our numbers. But our numbers are in fact going up, and they're going up reasonably quickly. Now, Florida has done a couple of things, and Texas was attempting to do a new carry law, concealed carry law, that a number of things to eventually do a deep dive into. But one of the interesting ones, Florida is aside from, well, I actually think I need to be a little careful getting into all of that right now. What I will say, it was the permitless carry in Texas, and Florida has now passed 2 pieces of legislation. One of them is the new law that is actually giving police brand new sort of sweeping powers to detain people and to blame any violence or even the threat of violence on community organizers of protests. And this is seen not as a bill to protect businesses or to protect citizens in the area, but rather to try to quell protests that are occurring. This is, let's see. All right, I don't have the numbers, but the total amount of damage that's been caused by protests in Florida is extraordinarily small, and the amount of chilling effect that it looks like this new bill will have is rather large. The other piece of news, which I really, we're going to have, I remember very clearly the day that we had to put up the screenshot of Mount Rushmore with the face of Kanye West on the end, and point out that this was not a joke. Kanye himself had that made and put up because he was in a state where he believed that was an inevitability as he was announcing his run or his candidacy for president of the United States under, and I am not kidding, the birthday party. I must also, in that same vein, announce that Matthew McConaughey is now pulling ahead of the state's incumbent Governor Greg Abbott in Texas, as he has announced that he is at least considering running for governor. I was in California under Schwarzenegger. It was a little weird to hear the Terminator leaving messages on my answering machine, which he was prone to do. He just reach out, but nonetheless, I liked Jesse Ventura originally, so I don't think Matthew McConaughey, Texas, well, probably couldn't be worse than the current governor. At any rate, I would like to point out to everybody that we do have mods who I will not dox, but are from Texas, and if anybody wants to give them a hard time, I wouldn't get in their way. So having said that, we are expecting, if they stay on schedule, we are expecting the verdict in about 10 minutes. I'm going to hand it back to our stream from CBS News, Minnesota. Let's put that back on, and as we continue to wait.
All unintentional deaths, and obviously a much lower threshold for the prosecution. Not to say that they have an easy case, not to say that proving these elements beyond a reasonable doubt is ever a slam dunk, not to take anything away from the fact that often in these excessive force cases, we do see a successful defense, but just to say it is a much lower standard than premeditated murder.
And so when you get into third-degree murder, it's yet a lower standard, correct?
Right. In this case, I'm pausing because there's been some kind of discussion, really, frankly, about which one is more difficult to prove. But the typical view is that the second-degree murder would be more difficult to prove. That's the one that carries the maximum of the 40-year sentence. The third-degree murder, again, is about creating something called a depraved mind, where you put others in a situation where they're facing imminent danger, and you're responsible for putting them in that situation. That would carry with it a lesser maximum sentence of 25 years, and then that second-degree manslaughter, which would require even less, a lower standard of showing culpable negligence, that carries with it a maximum of 10 years and I believe a fine of not more than $20,000. So you typically just kind of go down the line, second-degree murder being the most difficult, then third-degree murder.
And keep in mind, here's the other interesting thing. He can be found guilty on all of them. So depending on concurrent or consecutive, he can be found guilty on all of them. So like I said, they are prepared to take him into custody today. If it's guilty on any of them, sentencing would be in a little while, but obviously these are very serious charges, and it seems to me that reasonably low bar for finding guilty.
Options if they feel like, you know what, the prosecution was not able to reach that threshold of second-degree murder, but we do think that they were able to prove, let's say, third-degree murder or second-degree manslaughter. And some of the charges can be things called lesser included. So once you prove, for instance, second-degree murder, then in some jurisdictions that would carry with it lesser included charges of crimes that are easier to prove. So I wouldn't want people to take away the idea that it's rare or unusual in any sense to include an array of charges based on the same set of facts.
Okay. And Gloria, do you believe these were the proper charges? Because, of course, there's always some give and take. Do you believe that the prosecution, the state, did a good job in choosing these three charges to be levied against Derek Chauvin?
Well, it was because of the protests from individuals, groups around the country and in Minnesota, working with lawyers who said, why don't you have all of these charges? They would have had fewer. I mean, keep in mind, the reason why we have a special prosecutor in the first place was because the district attorney at the time said that they weren't going to prosecute, were not going to, because George Floyd died of natural causes. And so it was because the outrage of the people in the community, the videotape, and the people, pundits like myself, who said, what are we doing here? How can you not have any push toward having these criminal charges against this particular officer and the other three? Because we still have the trial for the other three. Keep that in mind. It doesn't stop here. and they may plead out. Who knows after what happens here? But I think many people are more focused on what they think is a first-degree murder, which is so difficult, wildly difficult to prove, that too often people focus on that there was intentional murder, that Derek Chauvin actually thought that he was going into this encounter to take the life of George Floyd. But it's nearly impossible sometimes, even with all the evidence, to prove what was going on in someone's head, to prove that was the motivation and malice aforethought. So I think that to that level of first-degree murder. So I think these are varied enough to have enough elements to them that are provable based on the evidence that's been given to the through the police department and handed over to the prosecutor's office. They made that great case, and I think that they did an extraordinary job. And as I said, I want to see that level of justice in all of these cases involving people who have been assaulted or murdered by police officers. Yes, police officers deserve their justice in court, but they also, and we had a vigorous defense counsel, but we also have to have prosecutors willing to do their jobs, and that means bringing these charges and then following up and zealously executing the law in a way they know they would do if it had been a civilian upon civilian murder.
Well, Gloria Brown Marshall, professor of constitutional law at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, thank you so much for generously giving of your time and expertise. We so appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Jessica, thank you for sticking around with us a little bit longer. I just want to point out we're looking at these live pictures from Minneapolis that show the crowds beginning to gain in strength and in number. Obviously very peaceful, holding signs. There are some people with bullhorns speaking to the crowd, but of course, everyone waiting with bated breath. I mean, the whole country, the whole world waiting on this verdict. It will. Whether we want it to or not, so much hinges on this decision, doesn't it, Jessica?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from so many miles away.
All right, what we have is Fox News on camera 2, and we have CBS on camera 3. We are awaiting the jury verdict. They had said that we would get that verdict between 3:30 and 4. Come 4 o'clock, they moved that to between 4:30 and 5. It is now 2 minutes from 5 o'clock. We have been informed that the producers for In Time are also the bailiffs and schedulers at the courthouse. So couple more hours, and I'm sure everything will be fine. We are awaiting the verdict. The verdict has been reached. It's going to be read. The verdict, they're looking at 3 specific counts. The bar seems to me to be reasonably low on all of them. Nonetheless, we really don't know what they're going to do. If I had to bet, I would say we're looking at guilty on at least one of them, and possibly all 3. I would actually even guess that all 3 is a distinct possibility. Whatever happens, I think there's going to be consequences. If it turns out not guilty on all of these, I think things are going to be interesting tonight. So we're going to continue to follow it. We've got live streams from both Fox News and CBS, and we're just waiting for the verdict at this point. 3 different counts. We were told by the judge a while back that even if there was another contributing factor, which absent that factor, Floyd would have survived. For example, drugs in the system or carbon monoxide from a car where his face was right near the tailpipe. Even if, absent those factors, he would have survived. That's not the question. The question is, if absent the officer's actions, would he have survived? And if the answer is yes, which it seems to me there's absolutely no way to avoid, if the answer is yes, then they have to find him guilty. So I think, based on what I've seen, it would be an extraordinary miscarriage if, again, just based on what I've seen, I think I have a hard time seeing how a not guilty could be justified. And if there is a not guilty, I think we're going to be in for a long night. All right, Porpoise, good to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. Yeah, good luck in your JavaScript. Yeah, I remember those days. So that's it. We don't know what the delay is. I know some people are worried about how is Fox spinning it. That's very good. We can get the audio in on Fox. I have a script that runs, and as soon as Fox comes on, it just gets muted. So I have to actually go through a couple of extra steps. Let's hear what Fox has to say.
Policing in the country. And I wanted to bring in Mike Bryant one more time and lean on him in what could be the last few moments we have here before the verdict is read. Mike, I think back to Dr. Martin Tobin specifically and his testimony. Do you think that, verdict aside, that the testimony given during this trial could have the potential to change the way that police, the use of force specifically?
Potentially. It's interesting because you had a number of police officers that testified this isn't the way we do it anyway. So the question is, you know, what was the training issue early that some say it isn't how we do it, and then, you know, we never heard from the defendant, which is his right under the Constitution.
I think this is a good observation actually by Fox, which is that, you know, basically all of the police officer witnesses said that he violated procedure, which I think is also going to make it very difficult for him not to get convicted. Isandering has joined us, and yeah, Isandering, just FYI, 3,000 reserve troops have been deployed in the area in Minnesota. Most of the businesses are now boarded up and anticipating what could happen if there is a not guilty verdict. And the courthouse has been described by one reporter as a fortress. So, yeah, I'd avoid if this is a not guilty. Like I said, I think it's going to be a long night. I'm cautiously optimistic, but, you know, I've been wrong before. So, but yeah, I'd be a little careful. So let's listen more to Fox. It's always interesting how and when. In fact, I want to see which Fox outlet this is, which affiliate. So let's play again.
The bellwether moment in that trial for a juror.
Well, there were a couple things that I think you could point to. As a group, we know that they were a group that tended to not get into the news or not follow the news on what was happening in this case anyway, because they wouldn't be on the jury if they were deep into it. Second is, we know when they were brought back on that Monday, and a group of them came back and they said they heard something and they turned it off right away. So as a group, they stayed away from everything, or as much as they could on this case. And then suddenly, boom, they got weeks of the videos over and over again, and the experts over and over again, and people talking over again. So they got a lot of, for people that originally turned away from it, a lot of information along those lines. For me, big points that came up in the trial were when we saw George Floyd inside Cup Foods. We got to see him alive. You know, you don't normally experience that. Did you get a chance to see somebody who the case is involving a dead person, but you get to see a bunch about him when he's alive that just is minutes before he dies. The point when they heard the defendant talk to Mr. Williams on that tape, you know, that was an opportunity for them to hear him at the scene right after it's happened and make some determinations on what that felt. I wonder what effect it had on.
The judge is back.
All right, I want to take you now inside the courtroom, as you can see there. We can assume the jury is in as well, since our court camera is now focused on the judge. It's moments away now from that verdict being read. Let's just stop and listen to see what the judge has to say.
All rise for the jury. All right, please be seated. Members of the jury, I understand you have a verdict. Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they will appear in the permanent records of the 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota, County of Hennepin, District Court, 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota Plaintiff versus Derek Michael Chauvin, Defendant. Verdict, Count 1. Court file number 27, CR 20-12646. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to Count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:44 p.m. Signed, juror foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 2. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Signed by jury foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 3. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Jury foreperson 019. Members of the jury, I'm now going to ask you individually if these are your true and correct verdicts. Please respond yes or no. Juror number 2, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 9, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 19, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 27, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 44, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 52, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 55, are these your true and correct?
All right, and you can see Fox is carrying the reaction of people outside. I may try to switch that and put that in a bigger screen, but a lot of celebrating outside. They are now polling the jury. He has been found guilty on all 3 counts.
True and correct verdicts.
Yes.
Juror number 92, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Are these your verdicts? So say you one, so say you all.
Yes.
Members of the jury, I find that the verdicts as read reflect the will of the jury and will be filed accordingly. I have to thank you on behalf of the people of the state of Minnesota for not only jury service, but heavy-duty jury service. What I'm going to ask you to do now is to follow the deputy back into your usual room, and I will join you in a few minutes to answer questions and to advise you further. So, all rise for the jury. All right, be seated. With the guilty verdicts returned, we're going to have Blakely, you may file a written argument as to Blakely factors within 1 week. The court will issue findings on the Blakely factors, the factual findings, 1 week after that. We'll order a PSI immediately, returnable in 4 weeks. And we will also have a briefing on, after you get the PSI, 6 weeks from now, and then 8 weeks from now, we will have sentencing. We'll get you the exact dates in a scheduling order. Is there a motion on behalf of the state?
Your Honor, the state would move to have the court revoke the defendant's bail and remand him into custody pending sentencing.
Bail is revoked, bond is discharged, and the defendant is remanded to the custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff. Anything further?
All
All right. Thank you.
All right, guilty on all 3 counts. Yeah, it's a little, and as you can see, we're about to the Minneapolis shot. I think, yep, that one on the upper right there is about to go, and you can see that's camera 2 immediately to my left. And I'm curious if we have audio on that. Let's just see what they're saying.
That Derek Chauvin remanded to the custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff, guilty on all 3 counts: second-degree murder, guilty; third-degree murder, guilty; second-degree manslaughter, also guilty. We showed you it live. It came down about 4:07. We also are showing you now what happened when those guilty verdicts were read. The crowds at the Hennepin County Government Center, at 38th in Chicago, all elated with those verdicts. As you can imagine, this is the anticipation of all of this has been on the minds of Minnesotans, the nation, and the world. And this is something that is the culmination of what occurred with George Floyd on May 25th, there at 38th in Chicago, when Officer Chauvin, then Officer Chauvin, knelt on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. The rest, as you've seen in the last couple weeks, is history, with the testimony both from the state and from the defense, trying to prove the state that this was a willful act, that he in fact did commit murder, and then his defense team trying to prove that George Floyd's death was...
All right. So that is guilty on all 3 counts. The sentence, if I recall, on the largest count was 26. Recommended sentence was 26 years. He can get those to run consecutive, to run concurrent. Any number of things can happen, but at a minimum, it looks like realistically he's looking at 26 years. He has been remanded into the custody of the state. Sentencing will be in about 8 weeks, and until that time, he looks like will not be freed on bail. So that is it. Chauvin has been found guilty on all the counts, and yeah, so there you have it. I too breathed a sigh of relief. I'm not entirely. I'm going to need to decompress for a little bit. I think there's a lot that all of us are going to be hearing about and engaging on over the next few days. Our Discord, we're going to be discussing these things heavily, I suspect, in our Discord. So anybody who would like to join us for these discussions, please do. I do apologize. Our what is it? Our Streamlabs bot used to only time out Tony Designs, and I don't know why I fixed that, but I did. But now it actually times out other people. So, and he appears to be the only one who can speak with relative impunity. At any rate, what we have now is. Oh, hold 1 second, please. Chauvin has been convicted of all 3 of the counts against him. Derek Chauvin has been remanded into the custody of the state, and the heaviest of these looks like they're looking at maybe 26 years in prison as the recommended sentence. My suspicion is that the judge is going to probably exceed that, since he's been convicted on all 3, and the lightest sentence would have been 12 years. I suspect they'll run concurrent, not consecutive, but they'll be higher than the recommendation for the single largest charge. At any rate, there's a number of crowds, and they actually already appear to be dispersing at least somewhat. I think this is going to take tensions down a bit. I don't know what we can expect tonight, but I think it's very different than if he had been found not guilty on all of them. I think this is strikes me as obviously the probably the best and most. I think it was the correct decision based on what we had seen and based on the judge's instructions. So thank you all very much for joining us. Like I have said before, our show tonight with Tart has been postponed, and we will be moving that back 1 week. We will have our regular rundown on Thursday, and on Friday, Neil 604 Atheist will be coming by, and we'll be just shooting the shit. So we're gonna have, I think, a good conversation with him, and I am looking forward to it. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the Discord to continue Tart-pwned. Oh dear Lord, doorknob head. Well, at least I am no longer the record holder for the worst dad joke on the Discord. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next couple of days for our upcoming shows. And if anything big happens regarding this, we will broadcast again. If you've gotten this far, please do like and subscribe. It genuinely helps us out. It's takes you 10 seconds and helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. So if you could do that, we'd appreciate it. And if you want to keep getting Overtime, I do suggest that you go. Overtime is going to be moving. The new channel has just dropped on the live chat there. If you want to go over there and subscribe, that would A, help us out, and B, make sure that you continue to get Overtime when we do finally make the move. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you soon.